boundaries, I'm not just passionate about it as a therapist, but as a human as well, right? Like, I always say boundaries keep us safe as humans. They help us to know where the limits are for our own behaviour, but also, you know, what we can expect of other people's behaviour.
Hello and welcome back to the 4th season of The Healthy Practice from Write Up. I'm Lisa Rourke, your host, and I am the content producer at Write Up. In today's episode, we're diving into boundaries. We know that most therapists enter the profession because they care deeply about people, but that same drive can make boundary setting harder. So how can we strike the balance and hold boundaries that benefit both the clinician and patient? To unpack this topic and provide some fantastic insights, I was delighted to be joined by Dr. Marianne Trent. Dr. Trent is a clinical psychologist, author and host of the podcast Psychology Actually. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Marianne. It's lovely to have you here this morning.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, we'll just get straight into it. So, boundaries. So why are you so passionate about boundaries as a therapist? And what has your own relationship with boundaries looked like in the past, in the future, in the present?
Absolutely. I think for me, boundaries, I'm not just passionate about it as a therapist, but as a human as well, right? Like, I always say boundaries keep us safe as humans. They help us to know where the limits are for our own behaviour, but also, you know, what we can expect of other people's behaviour. Even at a really kind of basic level, it's boundaries that keep society from kind of running amok and people from just creating crime everywhere, left, right and centre. It's that sense that actually there are consequences to my actions, and that, especially when we're working with clients where maybe things haven't always been straightforward, haven't always been kind or fair, boundaries are really important.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I feel like as I'm progressing through life, I've noticed how important boundaries can be just in your day-to-day life as well. And what do we actually mean when we talk about boundaries in therapy or like in a clinic setting?
I think it's really varied. And it's, you know, clinician to clinician, boundaries are going to different. But, you know, when I'm looking at my terms and conditions, that's often where I'll start and where we'll set the tone for kind of any work with clients. And it's about actually, what time should I show up for my session? Should I be a little bit early? What happens if I do that? If I'm working in person, is there somewhere I can wait if I am early? If I don't have a waiting room, you know, am I going to say, actually, please only turn up at your start time? If I'm working online, how late is it okay to turn up to a session? You know, all of this is going to be clinician dependent, right? But also, in between sessions, is it okay if I send you an 8-page report for you to read? You know, all of that is kind of in my terms and conditions. And it's not like we apply it like as a really harsh, hard thing. But, you know, if someone keeps testing the boundaries or meaning that we show up in different ways or having to do extra stuff that we wouldn't usually do for other clients, I think that's often a sign that maybe it's worth a conversation with somebody. And when we are working therapeutically, we often think, actually, if something is playing out for me in this relationship, it's likely that this is probably happening for them in their relationships as well. And so it's that idea of, it's kind of part of my role to go through boundaries with you, because when we're in a therapeutic space, it's a really nice opportunity to practice things in a safe way that don't feel so threatening inside the therapy room or inside the therapy space, so that people can then get that benefit of doing that outside. Does that make sense? So when we're setting those boundaries and working through them compassionately, it gives people a chance to do that in their real lives as well.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And why do you think boundaries can feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable for like yourself or therapists or like clinicians? Like, what do you think it can feel uncomfortable?
Oh, it can, can't it?
Yeah.
Having to set a boundary. Like if you imagine like the last time that you've been on a train, for example, or in a public waiting area and someone is listening to music without headphones, like it's really annoying, isn't it? And it's always
Yeah.
really lovely when someone actually says, "Oh, mate, would you mind just like, that's quite loud. Could you turn it down a little bit? Or have you got any
Yeah.
headphones?" And you're like, "Oh, thank God I didn't have to be that guy." But sometimes we do kind of have to be that guy.
Yeah.
And it's knowing, I think it's knowing when to pick your battles. So out in public, sometimes you just have to think, right, I'm going to make sure that I've got headphones. So I've got Apple headphones, and you can do noise cancelling on that, which is like just a
Yeah.
godsend sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
But
it is.
but therapeutically, boundaries are important. They do keep us safe and they help us to know the limits. And I'm a mother and I've got 2 children. And often, when you kind of find people saying that's not fair, that's often the sign, actually, I've broken my boundary or I haven't been consistent on that boundary. So if you're ever finding yourself feeling like something is unfair, if we dig a little bit deeper, it's probably because actually something around the boundaries we hold for ourselves or for other people has been kind of contravened. Part of my role as a psychologist, I'm a clinical psychologist, is that I have to be okay with having conversations that are challenging or difficult and can be uncomfortable. And I have to be able to do that, to be brave, because actually the clients they've got clear goals, right, in working with me. And if I'm always going to be Mrs. Nice Guy, Dr. Nice Guy, then I'm not necessarily helping them to reach those goals. So when I say Mrs. Nice Guy, I'm never mean to clients, but actually if I'm not helping them to stretch and to grow and to be boundaried with them, and if someone comes along and uses the first 45 minutes of their time to tell me about something random or a commute or whatever, it's like, okay, this is okay if this is how you want to use this session, but let's just check in with those original goals. And is that maybe quite far? Or is there a reason why we're not talking about that, or something is stopping us from getting to that? So it's just being clear about what we're doing and why, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And actually setting the boundaries it's only going to help a client as well, especially within their time with you. And can you share an example of a time when setting a boundary like improved your connection with a client?
Absolutely. So, in my terms and conditions again, like I'm such a terms and
And
conditions
the T's and
girl.
C's.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I do use write up for. It helps me feel safe, but it also knows that, let me cut that bit out. It also helps me to know that the client, hopefully if they've read them, understands what those limits are. And even things about disengagement, like if you don't want to do therapy anymore, that's absolutely okay. That's absolutely your choice. But if it's come as a result of something I've done or something we've done or something you don't like, isn't it a really nice opportunity to repair that rupture? So many times in life, things don't get resolved or just get buried, even in relationships, right? When we're working with people, if you keep coming back to the same fight or the same discussion, it's often because that hasn't been worked through, that rupture hasn't been repaired. And so if we are able to actually say to a client, I absolutely respect your right to not do this, but actually I wonder whether this might be an example of some of the things you've told me about in the past that you do when things get tricky or if you're feeling challenged. Could we maybe have a chance to get together, to discuss this? And I've done that a number of times with clients and they've been like, actually, I'm really pleased you said that. And I think you're right. And it can be a little bit awkward because you kind of do need to bring it up again in the next session. But if we're wanting people to do things differently, it's that saying, isn't it? If we always do what we've always done, then we'll always get what we've always got. So actually my role and the role of any clinicians is to do something a little bit different so that people can have a different outcome that helps them live a calmer, less distressed, more fulfilling life.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And so you would say like compassion is central to like a therapeutic relationship. So how can therapists practice compassion that is sustainable?
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So I think,
If that's possible.
yeah, I mean, compassion gets a bit of a misunderstanding and a bit of a kind of bad reputation, I think, because it isn't about being permissive. Even when it
Mhm.
comes to parenting, there's different modalities of parenting, and gentle parenting actually isn't boundaryless. It isn't just letting your children run feral. And the kind of the same is with compassion. So I'm not going to let you walk all over me as a friend, as a as a parent, as a
Mhm.
anything. But sometimes I'm going to hold my boundaries and sometimes I'm not. And boundaries and compassion. So compassion isn't always kindness, it's not always meek and mild. Sometimes being compassionate is about holding people to account. It's about thinking about, actually, when we're looking at compassion, of compassion-focused therapy, we've got the three systems: threat, drive, and soothing. And it's kind of how people might respond to us when they're feeling threatened. They
Mhm.
might be ruder, they might be, they might withdraw. And it's us being able to be compassionate about that and kind of thinking about the boundaries for our work, our relationship, whatever relationship you're in, right? This might be a friend, this might be someone at the gym, this might be a teacher, this might be a friend, this might be your partner. But it's thinking about those boundaries and being a little bit brave to have different conversations that maybe challenge people in a healthy way. Because if we're challenging people too much, then it's going to be it's not going to lead to a great outcome, and they're likely to think that we're
Mm.
awful and mean and
Yeah.
horrendous and not any good at being a friend or a partner. So
Yeah.
it's gently stretching and compassionately challenging. I don't know if you watch American what's it called? I don't know if you watch Married at First Sight Australia. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan.
Yeah.
And one of the most
Sometimes.
recent episodes is one of the men that actually kind of keeps talking about wanting a submissive relationship, a
Mhm.
submissive partner, and how he doesn't want to be challenged. And he's treating his wife and saying, actually, you challenge me too much. This isn't okay. And on the couch, they're like, actually, it's really normal within a relationship that you are able to challenge someone, you are able to hold them to account. And it's not okay that you're doing this. And I really do agree with that. Relationships should hold you to account, but not in a way that feels like you're being kind of vilified or being bullied. And so it's that kind of nuance, isn't it, of applying those boundaries, applying those limits in a way that isn't alienating people, and it also isn't making you look like a complete loser. It's a
Yeah.
tricky balance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it must be sometimes hard to find that in between kind of sweet spot with it. But
For
no,
sure.
yeah. So then if we move on to like self-disclosure, that can be quite a powerful tool when used correctly or intentionally. How do you think boundaries around wait, sorry. How do you think about boundaries around what, when and why to disclose?
Yeah, I think this is something that runs throughout kind of mental health training, and some of the horror stories as well that you might practice in role plays with people when you are training. Like, oh, you're the client and you go, tell me about this, or what about this, and what about this. And actually, in practice, it doesn't happen as often as you might think. And over time, I qualified in 2011, I'm
Mhm.
very much more now about probably using myself first as an intervention. But that doesn't mean that I'm your friend. So if I'm your therapist, I'm not your friend, but I will be friendly. Um, I don't think clients ever need to know my children's names. I don't actually share anything socially, even to my friends and family, publicly, with my kids' images on. So, I'm not going to tell you where I live, but I will tell you that I'm a mother and that I've got two children, if that's relevant. And it's about thinking about what is appropriate disclosure and what isn't. And this is going to be different depending on which modality someone works with. So there's a modality called kind of psychodynamic, where you might be kind of quite constrained. You might not necessarily wear like a brightly coloured top like I am. Like traditionally, people would wear very dark colours and try to just kind of almost blend into the background. And that's not necessarily always truthful for modern psychodynamic therapists. But, you know, if I'd asked you a question about yourself, often the answer would have been, well, that's interesting. You know, why would you want to know that? Whereas in actual fact, that's not usually how attuned or normal relationships would work. You give a little bit of yourself, and clients do feel like they want to choose you as a clinician. And I think in a modern world, more and more, people want to be able to see images or videos of their potential clinician talking, so that they're getting an idea of what they might be like kind of interpersonally, whether they think that the way this clinician talks is going to be okay. There's nothing worse than being really annoyed by the way that someone talks or some of the things they do, and then having to kind of get on board and work with them therapeutically. Or, you know, if you go on a first date and, like, you know, someone's got these really annoying habits and you're thinking, can I get on board with this for 50 years? And it's about working through whether that might be like you putting up barriers to get in the way of that. But, you know, and whether you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot and whether that really matters. But, you know, I think interpersonally, some of these things do matter. And if they matter to you, then they matter, right? But we're not using sessions just to talk about ourselves or our own stuff, because then you risk being what's called uncontained, right? Where it's not purposeful or conscious sharing. It's leaky. And I think that can be a sign that maybe you're not in the best place. Maybe you're feeling a bit stressed or burned out as a clinician. Don't know if you've ever watched Afterlife with Ricky Gervais, which is about when he's lost his...
Yeah, I did watch that, yeah.
When he's lost his wife. But his
Mm-hmm.
therapist, like...
Yeah.
horrendous. And as a therapist watching that, you're like, oh, it's so awful. Like, he swears and he's disgusting habits that he's got, and he constantly shares pictures of, like, memes and, like, you know, videos, and it's like, this isn't helping me. And I think he even says that, like, this isn't helping me. And it's just making sure that you're not that kind of therapist. So there's appropriate sharing, and then there's oversharing that then derails the client's experience. And actually, it's not necessarily for the client to bring that up with you as a boundary, but if you notice that they disengage, you know, sometimes that might be
that's
be
a warning
clue.
sign.
Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. Okay, so moving on. So have you seen positive examples in recent media? Obviously, there was an example of media that wasn't so positive. But have you seen any examples in recent media that challenge or explore the ideas of boundaries? I know that you'd mentioned in your notes that the TV show The Shrinking and Apple TV was quite a good watch for you. You thought it was a good representation. So just anything that you've seen recently, you think, yeah, that's how I'd like to be, or that's how a good example I've seen.
Exactly. So I pitched this episode on the back of watching Shrinking, because I was like, I love this show. And I don't know if you've ever watched it, but it's just genuinely really good. I'd say the first two series are amazing. The third one, I think they were wrapping things up a little bit, and so it felt a little bit different. But often my husband suggested watching it, and I thought, he wants to watch a program about, like, therapists. This is very, very un him. But from the first episode, I just loved it. So for anyone who hasn't watched it, it's about three therapists that all work together in private practice in America. And Harrison Ford owns the practice and has Parkinson's disease in it. And broadly speaking, it's about the relationship of these three people, and then their relationships outside of that, and their friends and their family, and any health struggles they're going through, or kind of things that crop up. And, you know, there's some clear unbounded behaviour, right? At one point, one of the main characters invites one of his clients to come and live with him in his pool house, like, kind of...
Right.
That's
We're
not
maybe not doing that in real life.
Yeah, I think that's going to lead to a complaint from the HCPC. But there you can see, you know, appropriate use of self in that, and the being human. And one of the characters is hilariously funny, and she kind of will use herself within her interventions, and that really matters. But it's not easy, trying to portray what goes on in a therapy room, because of course it needs to kind of be a bit extra, and often you're watching things about therapists, and therapists are always the murderers, like psychologists are always the dark and dodgy ones. And you're like, why? But then when I came to sit down to think about, what if I was going to write a fiction book about kind of psychology profession, I'd murder everyone. Like,
the therapists just know too much, don't they?
But I think when you know about good practice, it's kind of easy to then portray bad practice. So what I really like is when it's clear that there's been kind of someone with therapeutic experience as part of the kind of the ethics or the screening or the kind of production, to know kind of where the limits are and what's reasonable and what's not. And I feel like that's perhaps been done in that situation, in shrinking, but you can obviously see sometimes where that just hasn't been done, and you're like, that would not happen, that is not okay.
I know, and it's like, it's given us a bad rep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Running your own practice can be difficult, and at Rate Up, we know the boundary between a therapist and a business owner can often blur. Using Stripe, Rate Up Tap to Pay allows you to process payments on the go. There is no need for a bulky payment terminal, your phone becomes the terminal. So whether you're in the office or out and about seeing clients in person, your business continues to run smoothly. Join over 50,000 clinicians who are taking ownership of their practice with Rate Up. Go to rateup.com, that's WRITEUPP.com. Okay, so just got one more question before we wrap up, but what role does supervision or other support play in maintaining healthy boundaries?
Yeah, it's a great question. So supervision is a way of keeping ourselves safe, but it's a way of keeping our clients safe. It's about client protection is the primary factor. And if you've got a really great supervisory relationship, it feels like half therapy. So it's actually to make sure that it's keeping us together as a clinician. But it isn't therapy, right? So if it starts to feel like therapy, then maybe you need to get your own therapist. It's a space to explore. Actually, I did this thing, and I wouldn't usually do this thing, and I wonder what that's about. So if you're noticing patterns, or maybe that a particular client is pushing different buttons in you that you wouldn't usually have, or if you find yourself kind of avoiding discussing a boundary or avoiding bringing something up, then it can be a really nice opportunity to use that supervision just to check that you are, there can be a number of reasons. It might be that you're not the best fit for that client clinically. It might be that, you could do with using a different approach or a different set of skills, or doing something a different way. But using that supervision, I think, to check on you and check on your well-being, it's really important. So anybody running a supervision session, it shouldn't be about just case management. There should be some checking in. So when I was bereaved and coming back from bereavement leave after losing my father, some element of that was about, how are you doing? Can we selectively think about your cases to make sure there's maybe not too many dead dads, maybe not too much cancer going on? Mm-hmm. Dead dads and cancer crop up everywhere, though, so it's not always possible. But supervision is really a great check-in to keep you safe and to make sure that you are doing the best for your clients.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Marianne. That was great, and it was really interesting to learn from your side of the seat on how boundaries work for you guys and your clinics. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And that's the end of today's episode. I just want to say a big thank you to Marianne for her time and wonderful insights. Remember to check out rateup.com for all your practice's software solutions and to start your free 30-day trial, no payment details required. Thanks for listening to the Healthy Practice podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a rating and review. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.